Okay, so you can see what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about flag burning and it being protected speech under the First Amendment. As you see, I pulled up a quick, brief recitation of several cases and the current law as it goes to burning the American flag. Now we're going to also talk about another side to this very issue of when you have assemblies and certain types of speech under the First Amendment. All right, so let's look here. This is a news report from Sky News, which is an Australian news outlet, but I believe it's owned by Fox, or the owner of Fox. This actual footage, I believe, was taken by the Associated Press. I've seen this imagery, and from this angle from several people. But as you see, there's also many press people in the crowd here. This says, a man tries to save a burning American flag has been shoved by protesters outside the Democratic National Convention. Now I'm going to play some of this, and we're going to have a discussion about flag burning and protests, and that being a type of protected speech. Okay, let me pause it right here. The imagery, all right? You see what the words say here. The protesters ended up outside the Israeli consulate protesting the war in Gaza and chanting "Free Palestine." All right. Now, many of the people in the crowd here have their faces covered. But as you see, there has been numerous officers equipped in riot gear that have been dispatched to this location. Let's get into this first portion here, flag burning protected by the First Amendment. My question was burning the American flag as a crime, okay? Because many people wonder, if I were to, as a part of a protest, go to a public location and burn the American flag. Now, I'm not concerned right now with another country's flags because their laws don't apply in America. Unless we have certain treaties in place to where we're going to show comity with one another, and that's COMITY. And that's just simply mean that a person's laws will be enacted in another location. This says burning the American flag is a controversial issue in the United States. While some view it as a form of protest and free speech, others see it as an act of desecration and disrespect. All right, let's pause there. Let me go back because I don't believe it showed the very beginning of this video.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
We'll burn the American flag.
We did.
It's our country. It's our country.
All right. Now, the one person who did not have his face covered was an adult male, potentially former military, but if not, just a citizen, a bystander who happened to be there, and he saw the protesters begin to try to burn the American flag, and he saved it. That goes directly to the end of this first sentence, where others see the act as desecration and disrespect. All right. I can't see who the people are that have their faces covered, but the person sounded young. Okay. Now, I deal with people on a daily basis, so I have a fairly good feel based on a person's voice, gauging how old a person is. All right, the gentleman who attempted to stop the burning of the flag, he spoke in a way that was, he spoke and he looked as an older person, a person beyond the age of 40 years old, maybe in his 50s, while the other person seemed to be slight of frame, and the person could be older and slight of frame, but his speech, it seemed to give telling signs of a person maybe anywhere from their early 30s back down into their early 20s. All right, let's move on to this second paragraph here where it talks about Texas versus Johnson in 1989, where the Supreme Court had to deal with the First Amendment protections. All right, symbolic speech is what they call flag burning, okay? And you see it barely won in 1989, where you had a person who burnt the flag in protest. Not a flag, but the flag, the United States flag in protest. He was trying to protest the policies of Ronald Reagan at the time. All right, his actions were considered protected under the First Amendment. All right. There have been many times when we, in the past, had laws concerning federal flag desecration. All right, but those laws were ultimately discarded due to case law. You see the Supreme Court in 1990, United States v. Eichmann. And this is a good teaching point. For all my people out there who are not versed in the law, when you see a name in that V period and another name, that tells you how to read what the case is called. And that case is called, or the style of the case is Supreme Court of the United States versus, that's what that V period means, Eichmann. That's that person's last name. And it tells you what year this case was from. And you have to do that because if you're going to name something by the last name, you might end up with numerous cases because there's only so many last names, but there are 330 million people that live here. So many names are going to be in common. And you don't give a full name, and even a full name will be in common sometime. All right. All right, once again, the last few paragraphs here. The key point is that the most recent attempt to criminalize flag burning in the United States was in 2006. It didn't pass through the Senate, because you need 2/3 vote to amend the Constitution. Okay, that's what they're talking about. They were going to create an amendment about flag burning. It did not pass. All right, let's move to a different issue here. All right, because we're talking about protected speech. You may hear people talking about you having certain rights. You've heard about the Bill of Rights. All right, the First Amendment is the freedom to assemble, the freedom of speech, things like this. All right, the freedom of religion. All right. Protests are considered the part of the speech and the assembly. All right, to assemble, to come together. All right, you can only come together if you're allowed to do so. All right, that's why you have such an issue with the First Amendment and certain vagrancy laws, certain loitering. You mean people just hanging around together. All right, so that's why there was a conflict between certain laws at certain times and points in the United States history. All right, getting back to this, what we're talking about. Let's move on to our next thing we're going to ask about. And we're going to call this to incite a riot. All right, this is a follow-up question, so we're still asking about flag burning, but we're going to talk about also inciting riots. To incite a riot is basically mean to cause these people who have assembled to go out and destroy things unlawfully. All right, so let's look at, and they gave me some U.S. and then also I see some UK things it's talking about here also. But we're really concerned about here in the United States because I practice law in the United States. I don't practice in any other countries. Let's see what this says. Inciting a riot, legal consequences in notable cases. Federal law, that's talking about the United States federal law. It says under 18 U.S. Code section, that's what that little symbol means, section sign, 2101. It's illegal to incite a riot, organize, promote, encourage, participate in, or carry on a riot. This includes urging or instigating others to riot. The penalty can include a fine of up to 5 years in prison. All right, that's federal law. All right, we're going to look at inciting a riot in Illinois here in just a second. State laws vary, but many have similar provisions. For example, in New York, all right, it's a Class A misdemeanor to incite a riot. We're going to look up Illinois here in just a second. All right, I don't see anything. The Capitol riots happened in January 6th of 2021. All right. Legal defenses. Defenses against inciting a riot may include urging or arguing that the speech was protected under the First Amendment. All right, that's true. So when you may see that as a defense, saying I had a First Amendment right to say these things, however, inciting a riot is the number one thing that will take protected speech, or the type of speech will be labeled as not protected. All right, inciting a riot. Let's take a look at the Illinois law for inciting a riot. All right, no, don't need that. All right, in Illinois, the law regarding inciting a riot is outlined in the Illinois Complied Statutes. I guess that's what they call their code. In Arkansas, it's called the Arkansas Code Annotated. That's where I'm at. That's where I practice law. That's where I passed the bar at. So, according to 720 ILCS 5, I think that's /25-1, a person commits mob action when they engage in the following. All right. Number 1, the knowing or reckless use of force or violence, disturbing the public peace by 2 or more persons acting together and without authority of law. Number 2, the knowing assembly of 2 or more persons with the intent to commit or facilitate the commission of a felony or misdemeanor. Number 3, the knowing assembly of 2 or more persons without authority of law for the purpose of doing violence to the person or property of anyone supposed to have been guilty of a violation of the law, or for the purpose of exercising correctional powers or regulative powers over any person by violence. The penalties for mob action, so they call a riot mob action. And riots are really, they have been historically known as a mob. Mob action in violation of paragraph 1 of subsection A is a class 4 felony. Mob action in violation of paragraph 2 and 3 is a class C misdemeanor. A participation in mob action by violence inflicts injury to the person or property of another commits a class 4 felony. All right, mob action that who does not withdraw when commanded to do so by a peace officer is a class A misdemeanor. All right, so we also see something about community service. Our next question needs to be, all right, in Illinois, felonies are classified into 6 categories. All right, we see the 6 categories listed here. First degree murder is a category all unto itself. All right, the sentence is 20 to 60 years in prison. It can be extended from 60 years to 100 years. All right, you have a class X felony, and these are the most serious after first degree murder, and the sentence ranges from 6 to 30 years in prison. Probation is not allowed. All right, you see aggravated battery with a firearm, home invasion, and armed robbery are some of their crimes that fall under the X level felony. You have class 1, 2, 3, and 4 felonies. We saw that mob action is a class 4 felony. It says the sentence ranges from 1 to 3 years in prison, and it can be extended up to 3 to 6 years in prison. All right, we'll give some examples of the other types of class 4 felonies: identity theft, using someone's credit or debit card without consent, selling stolen property online with a value of $300 or less. All right, so this is the level of felonies here. And let me also give everyone an idea of what I'm using to pull back this information. Now, I don't practice in Illinois, but this same search that I did here, and this is Search GPT, is basically just like Google, except it gives you back one result versus giving you back a list of results. This is not available to the public at large just yet. I'm a part of the alpha test of this, or beta test. I don't know which testing round I'm in this, but it's pretty good. But what I'm using it for is very simply the same thing I can do on Google. I typed in what I'm looking for. You got to be exact when you're searching for things, okay? So if you're talking about finding the law, in every state's laws are available online for everyone to take a look at, okay? Now, you have to be careful to make sure that you're looking at the most up-to-date. But if you're looking for general information, you can do this type of searching yourself. I would encourage everyone that if you actually are dealing with a legal issue, to go seek legal counsel from someone who has studied the law in that area. And when I say in that area, I mean in that place, that locale where you're at, okay? That's why they are paid to practice law in that area, okay? Because they've stayed there, they passed the examination that shows that they are fit to represent others in that area, all right? I myself don't represent anyone. This is simply educational information. This information is being provided so we can educate ourselves about what's going on, and that you have the ability to look at another situation and potentially find the answer you need, or at least you know that you may need to seek further advice. The one thing all jurors in the United States are charged with, all right, and especially in the state of Arkansas, a juror is charged with this thing, and this is read at every jury trial, that you as a juror are not required to put to put off or to put away your experiences and observations in life, meaning that you don't have to get rid of your common sense as you sit here as a juror on whatever case you're sitting on. That's important. All right, we're trying to build common sense here. We're trying to build an understanding on how to deal with our criminal justice system, how to understand its dealings and what happens when you have certain charges. All right, getting back to this, which is the story, and as you see, it's about 4 minutes. Let's watch a little bit more and see what happens here. All right, so you see there where you had the gentleman trying to stop, and I can tell now that's a very young man who's burning the flag, and the ones putting on the protest, they're all younger than myself. Okay, I'm not the oldest individual, but I can tell that everyone there is younger than me. And the gentleman who was trying to stop them is definitely older than everyone there. He's trying to give some advice. He's saying, don't burn the American flag. Now, we've talked already and we've seen that while they have a right to burn the American flag, it can be seen in this setting, and the way that young man was talking back to, or talking and interacting with the older man, and I'm pointing, he was on this side, the older man was on this side of the picture. And let's see if we can rewind it back, and we'll pause it there. I may have went too far. I can't really get. Okay, we do have the man's name though. Let's pause it there. All right, this gentleman here, his name is Ben Berquam. Tried to rescue the burning flag and called the protesters the enemy of our country. All right. When you have two competing sides and a potential for a controversy, the actions of the person burning the flag might be seen as inciting a riot. All right. If it's going to cause mayhem between all these individuals. Now, I didn't pause it where there's a pushing back and forth, but you saw someone trying to stop the older man from getting involved, all right, by simply holding their hand out like this, like trying to hold him back. And you have the younger man pushing him. If that would have started where these people would have jumped on this older man, that is seen as mob action under Illinois law. That also is considered the beginnings of a riot, what will be deemed as potentially a riot. All right, and that is not protected under the First Amendment. The rights and protections of being able to assemble go away once something unlawful happens. All right, and the best way to understand this, it's almost like, let me give you an example, very modern day time example. All right, if you ever have rented an Airbnb, all right, the owner is giving you permission to be on their property. Now there's certain rules you have to follow. Now if you, one big rule, no smoking in the house. All right, if you smoke in the house, and say for instance they had an alarm in their house that goes off and it notifies them due to them having Ring or Blink or any of these other home monitoring systems that can alert you if something happens at your home, they could then kick you out of the house, change the locks, or wherever they're going to do. And you lose your money that you paid to be there because your permission has been revoked. All right? Everyone walking around has certain permissions that have been granted by the United States government. They're called the Bill of Rights. Now, certain things you do can revoke those permissions. All right, now we're calling them permissions, but they're rights. All right, that's the metaphor. Lawyers talk like this all the time. We build metaphors to help people understand the information. All right, now this is the metaphor in being used to help people understand. That goes back to the Socratic method. All right, that's when two people have a conversation about something, and the two people are, one being the teacher, the other being the student, having a conversation about something, and the teacher trying to elicit a deeper understanding of what's being talked about. All right, through asking questions and continuing to ask questions of the person. Cross-examination and direct examination of a witness happen the same way, except you're trying to elicit information from the witness in order to give the knowledge to the jury, all right, or the judge, whomever is going to be the fact finder. All right, that's a bunch of talking on that. All right, but this is basically, I want this to be a moment where we discuss a current event, since this just happened yesterday, and there are some legal principles that can be viewed. Let me see if there's going to be any more reporting on this. All right, I would say the gentleman that was standing just about here with the dark, longer hair and a black mask on, a black, I guess KN95 mask on, he made sure to separate the more hot-headed individual with their face covered from the older man. I believe he's versed on how to protest. Protests must remain peaceful. Otherwise, you'll be in violation of potentially state law and federal law. Okay? So he attempted to separate the two and de-escalate the situation. All right. Well, once again, this is a news outlet that is, I believe this news outlet is right leaning, so they're going to get contributors on who make statements. All right. Not really worried about what his statements are one way or the other. But there was a comment that came across the bottom of the screen that said, didn't understand why they are allowing these protests to happen, why the city of Chicago is allowing these protests to happen. We talked about it already, and we'll go back to it. All right, so we have the First Amendment of the Constitution here. All right, and once again, as I've said before, when you're doing legal research or when you're doing advanced research, period, don't be afraid to use the internet, okay? As you use the internet, there's a certain way where you need to do your research, and you need to start somewhere. The internet is a perfect place to start doing research on a broad, high level, all right? So it's okay. Read what you have and read what you find and do further research based on what you find, all right? But here, we see this came from Wikipedia, and I also like how this search GPT gives you citations on what it finds, and you can look at their links over here. It's highlighted, and it shows you where all information is pulling back for you. All right, but going back over here, let's take a look at what this says briefly. All right, it says the First Amendment of the United States Constitution is part of the Bill of Rights and was adopted on December 15, 1791. It protects several fundamental rights, including, all right, the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and freedom to petition. All right, here's the exact text. All right. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. All right, what we're dealing with here in this report is the freedom of speech. You see the freedom of press happening, and you see the freedom of assembly. All right, I talked earlier about this being a right-leaning news organization. All right, that's a part of the freedom of press. All right, it ensures that the press can publish news and opinions without government censorship. Censorship would mean that this would not be allowed to be published at all in the United States. All right, that's not true. That statement's not true, so it's allowed to be here. Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech protects the right to express ideas and information without government interference. All right. They were allowed to do this. Now, there are some other images. If you do searches, either on YouTube, and probably even TikTok, or any of these video platforms, Rumble, X, you'll probably see some of the things that happened later on that night, where there was police presence in order to make sure that this assembly was not about to turn into a riot. Freedom of assembly. It allows people to gather peaceably for various purposes. The purpose of this was dealing with what's going on in Gaza and with Israel and the Palestinian refugees and the Palestine nation. People of that descent, things of that nature. All right. That's what these people are assembling to discuss and to talk about. Freedom of press also is involved because there's many press people that are here on site recording what's going on. All right, if there was no freedom of press, it could be considered illegal to be a part of these going ons, and those press people could be charged just like those people that have assembled for the protest. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the end of this report. We've talked for a few moments here. I'm going to end this video here, and if you found this information useful, all right, this is the type of information that I'm going to be bringing forth as we talk about the law. All right, I didn't put my introduction at the beginning, and I'll probably just cut in an intro of what I want to have there, especially since this isn't a live video. But let me give you some information about in the coming weeks. All right, in the coming weeks, I'm going to begin having some Google Meets, and I'll have the ability for people to come on, up to 500 people, and we can have a class session. You'll be allowed to interact with me and ask questions based on the topics that we're discussing that day. All right, I want to make sure that I get the information out beforehand of what we're going to be discussing, so it can be reviewed by you all, the public. And this is going to be legal education. All right, first question is why, or what gives me the authority to teach anyone about legal education? All right, first of all, I'm a lawyer. All right, I passed the bar in my state, and that allows me to provide legal information. All right, this is education, and this is not, the things I'm going to talk about are not geared specifically toward any individual, but can be used to better inform you about the law and how the law operates and views certain things. All right, so we're going to end this one here. This is Advocacy Alchemy with Professor Ross. I am Professor Ross. I do hope to see you all in the near future, and if you enjoyed the video, give me a like. Also subscribe, and there will be more information as we move into the future. You all have a good evening.